Hey everybody, Robin from Backscatter here.
And Jim from Backscatter here.
Today we're breaking down everything underwater shooters need to know about using an Ikelite housing. We're going to cover a little bit about what makes Ikelite an Ikelite, what you get in the box with their housing, all you need to know about the ergonomics, the control placement, and how it really works underwater. We're going to break down your different port configurations, your strobe options, how you use a viewfinder, basically everything you could ever want to know about shooting an Ikelite underwater. And we're even going to show you how to put it all together from top to bottom. What do you think about that, Jim?
Sounds great. Let's get started.
So before we really get into the setup and things, let's talk about what makes an Ikelite an Ikelite. Who are these guys?
Yeah, Ikelite has been around for over 50 years. They've been making housings for quite a long time. They're made in the USA in Indianapolis, Indiana. So they got lots of street cred.
Right on. From a construction and material standpoint, what sets an Ikelite housing apart from other housings?
So the Ikelite housing is made from polycarbonate, which is plastic. And so as such, it can be made less expensive than aluminum housing. So it's a great budget alternative to an aluminum housing. Other benefit to that is that they use the same size shell for all of their mirrorless and SLR.
Okay.
All they got to do is just drill the holes for where the controls go. That also helps keeps the cost down by having one basic shape for all those cameras.
So we got the housing in front of us. Let's break down what's actually included with your purchase. What all do you get with the housing?
Well, obviously you get the housing. On top of that, what you do get is you get an electronic bulkhead with a manual hot shoe connector on it. So manual only, not TTL, that's optional.
Okay.
You also get a single left handle. The right handle we have pictured here is optional, can be added on later. For an underwater photography, you want that, but maybe if you're doing surf or some pool work or something, you might not need that second handle, so they have it optional. What we have pictured here with the port's not included. That's going to be dependent upon your lens. We just have that here pictured with the housing all set up here. Other things that are included, we have a port cap. This tool here is to help retain the gear that you use for the lenses inside the housing. We also have two Allen keys here that'll access most of the Allen screws on this housing if you need to make any adjustments. Also comes with Ikelite O-ring grease.
Naturally.
Yep, a little bit of small container, but it does include the grease. You'll have to buy some extra. This vacuum bulkhead is included with the housing. However, the vacuum pump is not. This is a separate purchase.
Okay.
With the vacuum pump, it's an analog system. So basically the way it works is you hook it up, you pull it down to, let's say, 10 inches of mercury. And then when you have that set, what you want to do is just check that 15 minutes later. If the setting on the gauge is exactly the same, then you know that your vacuum is holding, that the housing is sealed, safe to get in the water.
When talking about adding on that right handle to the housing, and the issue of reach to the controls may come up. Ikelite's got a solution to that.
Yes, they do. So you take my hand, average size hand, I guess, for a guy my size. When I reach around the housing, I really want to be able to reach the shutter and the AF on button at the same time. It's a little bit of a reach for me, even with my hands, to get to both of those. So what Ikelite has, especially for people with smaller hands, is they have these adapters that you can put on to extend the controls out a little bit to make it more comfortable, more ergonomic to hit both of those controls at the same time.
So another optional, yet highly recommended, borderline essential accessory is an expanded viewfinder. So Jim, tell us what we need to know about expanded viewfinders as they pertain to Ikelite housings.
Yeah, so this optional viewfinder is from Enon, and Ikelite has made an adapter to use it on their housings. There's two versions of this. There's a 45, which is in my hand right now, which is great for macro or anything where you're in a horizontal position underwater, keeps you off the bottom. And then if you're doing, like, let's say more pelagic type stuff where it could be like bait balls or in a shark cage where you're vertical, they make a straight viewfinder that can also be adapted to this housing.
Nice.
The other great thing about these viewfinders is they expand the view that you get with compared to the stock viewfinder on the housing. And so it gives you a much larger area to see, and you can see the whole frame as opposed to the stock viewfinder, which will result in a smaller image and you won't be able to see the whole frame.
And if you want to learn more about what we're talking about with that and really see that in action, check out our complete guide to why you need an expanded viewfinder for underwater photography. So as far as accessory support and what we can connect to the housing here, we got a couple different things going on the top of the housing with our bulkheads. Break those down for me. What can we put on here?
Right, so As I said before, it comes with the electronic sync bulkhead here for manual strobe operation. There's also a blank plug here that's M16, so you can put on a number of things in here. You can put another bulkhead on here for strobes if you wanted to. Ikelite doesn't make any fiber optic trigger, but if you wanted to put a fiber optic trigger in the housing, you can put fiber optic bulkhead in this slot here.
Very cool.
Another option you have here is for HDMI, if you're going to put a monitor in here as well. Another option that is not included in the housing though is they can put in another hole inside of the housing for larger bulkhead pass-throughs for, let's say, larger HDMI cables or something like that.
So I also see we've got a threaded hole front and center up top here. What's going on with that?
Yeah, this is a focus light mount. So this is a 1/4-20 hole. You can put a ball mount in here, put a focus light on the top here.
So what do we need to know about getting this rig onto a tripod underwater? What kind of threaded hole options do we have?
Well, you got a couple options here. Number one, the tray that is included with it has a tripod hole in the bottom and a couple of threaded screws. So if you wanted to attach a tripod plate or a pan head, you can do that directly to it. Secondly, you can also take this handle off the housing. And when you do that, there's 2 holes in the bottom that you can use a rail on there as well to attach to a tripod.
So Jim, we've talked about having manual strobe connection coming out of the single bulkhead on here, but what do we need to do to get automatic or TTL exposure out of our strobes with this?
Right, so Ikelite makes their own strobes that have TTL built into them. So what they do to have that capability is there's a pigtail that goes into this bulkhead here. So that contains the TTL electronics in it. You also need to take the TTL hot shoe and swap out the manual hot shoe, which is plug and play, simple to install inside the housing. And that will give you TTL through the housing and then a dual cord up to 2 strobes for automatic exposure. Now with Ikelite, this is a hardwired TTL system, and we have found that the hardwired TTL systems are much more accurate than the slave systems through fiber optic going off of a camera flash underwater. So accuracy from Ikelite is actually really good. Also, Ikelite has a 15-foot extension cord available as well if you want to do some off-camera lighting. Also, with the ability at Backscatter Service Department, if you wanted something longer than the 15-foot cable, we can do that as well.
So what's up with these buttons on the handles? What do we got going on here?
Yeah, so this is where you mount your ball mount for your strobes. This is a quick release system. You press this in, you can snap the ball mount in place. When you take it out, you press it to release, pull it out. This is the quickest system of any manufacturer to get strobe arms on off a housing.
And so most of us that have shot with a dome underwater know that sometimes it wants to rise and kind of go belly up due to its positive buoyancy. Ikelite's got something to help with that.
Yes, they do. They have this trim weight system that attaches to the bottom of the tray of the housing, and you can add a weight onto it to help trim out the housing, get it nice and level in the water, and prevent that wrist fatigue.
Let's get into the control set and how this thing works underwater.
All right, great. Let's go into this. So whenever I'm putting my hands on a housing or checking out a housing, I go a number of important things to me about control set placement and how it works. So when I'm going to start with the right side of housing, kind of going to work over and then work towards the back. Most important thing you have is your right hand, like I mentioned earlier, for the shutter release and the AF on button. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit of a reach to hit both of these without the extensions, but when I put the extensions on for me, it fits my hand perfectly. So it's very important to be able to, on any housing, be able to do that. Ikelite's got that covered. Second thing you've got is your shutter speed and aperture controls. These are the dial down here and the dial on the back. Can you operate these things one-handed? Are they within reach? So with the Ikelite, you can't really do it one-fingered here. You really need to use a thumb and a finger to turn these. It's a little bit too tough to turn on both of these controls. The one on the back, you'll have to take your hand off the handle to actually turn that. On the one on the front, you'll have to take your hand off the handle to turn it as well. The advantage of that is if you're a surf photographer and you're doing a lot of like rough conditions, or if you're in a lot of current, you're jumping in really quick on stuff, these controls are not going to get bumped and change your settings. So, so for those people, I think that's a good benefit to this control set. All right, so for controls on top, what you'll notice here is that there's no labels on any of them. Not a big deal. You can see through the back of the housing, through the clear port there, that you can see what they're hitting. But if you do need a little bit of a reminder, you can always use a label maker, put a couple labels on top if you want. But to be honest with you, after a week of shooting this thing underwater,
You're gonna be familiar.
You're gonna be familiar with everything, so I don't think that's a big deal. As you come over here, we've got the zoom gear. Now you look at the zoom gear here. This could be focus if you're using macro lens, zoom if it's a zoom lens. But this here is very easy to operate without taking your hand off the handle with one finger operation.
Yeah.
Plenty of reach for me. I think even some with small hands, if they tilted their finger forward a little bit, it's still very easy to do.
Super oversized control knob makes it really easy to hit even just with one finger.
Yep.
Yeah.
So now moving on to the back of the housing, what you'll notice is the controls are directly placed over top of the buttons. That makes it very simplistic to service, very simplistic for field repair, and it's a lot less expensive that way too to do that.
Everything's basically just a straight push activation. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
So with that, the benefit is the cost reduction, the simplicity of the design. The disadvantage is that the button cluster tends to be kind of close together. So if you're in cold water using gloves, even though they've raised these buttons so that there are different heights, so that it makes it easier to press them, they're still clustered pretty close together. So when you're doing that with gloves, it's a little bit harder to access. The other thing is, if you have an expanded viewfinder on the back of the housing, it does obscure a little bit a couple of controls, the menu and the record button on this particular housing. So you might have to tilt the viewfinder if you have gloves, but even I was able to sneak my thumb under there and actually get it to activate with that.
So now we know just about everything we need to know about an Ikelite housing, but now let's get into the setup procedure. What do we need to know there?
Yes, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over setup of the housing, strobes, ports, lenses, everything you need to do to take this thing underwater. And it's gonna be covering mirrorless, full frame mirrorless, and also DSLR type cameras. Even though we have a Sony here, the setup process is basically the same.
Yeah, if there's something that's different on your particular rig that doesn't match up with what we cover in the video, just pick up the phone and give us a call. We'll get you all sorted out.
Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying this video. You know, you can join our family by buying your underwater photo and video gear from us here at Backscatter. Every purchase includes free lifetime tech support, will beat any price, hands down, and we ship worldwide daily. Our in-house authorized warranty service center has you covered for any maintenance and repairs. Here at Backscatter, we dive, shoot, and service everything we sell. Whether you're point and shoot or professional, we look forward to helping you meet your underwater imaging goals. Now back to the video.
So first things first, let's get this right handle on. Out of the two Allen keys you have here, use the larger Allen key. There's two screws that go onto the bottom of the housing here. Very simple to do. All right, now that we've got that done, hands is a little bit further away from the AF on and the shutter release button. So this would be a good time to also put on the two extensions for that to make it more ergonomic for your hand. You take the small Allen key for that and loosen that, and that control will come right off, and then you'll be able to put the extension on. You do that the same exact manner for both the AF on button and the shutter button. So when these controls are put in place, make sure that they're in the proper position. These are keyed, so you can have them in different steps. They're not free spinning. So make sure to line them with your thumb and index finger. So now what we're gonna do is get ready to open up the housing. So we're gonna lay it face down, then we're gonna do the top latch first.
We're just gonna depress on the little lever and then lift up on the buckle.
Then do the next two latches simultaneously or as close as you can to that, so you don't have the back of the housing kind of flexing off. Then just lift away and you're good to go. So the next step we're gonna do is install the 45-degree viewfinder. In order to do that, we need to remove the standard finder from the back of the housing. When you purchase the 45-degree viewfinder, it comes with a handy tool there, and you can just slide that into those slots there and use that to take a few turns. And once you got that, you can use your hands to go the rest of the way. What you notice in here, there is an O-ring. When you look in the viewfinder there, there's we would call that a face seal type O-ring, because it rests against the face of the back of the housing. And then the 45-degree viewfinder has one as well. This is our first step talking about O-rings. Anytime you have an O-ring, what you want to do is make sure the O-ring is clean, it's free of any dirt, hair, lint, dust, debris of any sort. And also you want to make sure that it has some lubricant on it as well. Now, in the manual, Ikelite says you don't need to grease this O-ring in here. I think that why they're saying that is because there is a little bit of grease that comes in it from the manufacturing process when they install it themselves. However, after time, you are going to need to put a little bit of layer on grease on here, because as you're turning it, when you turn it into the housing, that O-ring is going to be contacting the back of the housing and needs to spin on there in order to make a seal.
And then before we put everything back together, we'll do one last good visual inspection of that O-ring to make sure that there's nothing that could compromise our watertight seal.
Okay, so as Robin's threading this in, what's going to happen, he's going to reach a point where he needs to use the tool on the inside of the back plate there to finish tightening the O-ring up there.
Yeah, the threads have basically already caught, and now the viewfinder is just freely spinning. We're going to take that spanner and put it right inside. And we're going to turn counterclockwise to continue tightening down those threads.
Because you're on the other side of the housing, that's why. It's clockwise from the outside.
Feels backwards, but you're really doing it, from the outside.
So now that we got the viewfinder installed, we're going to set that aside and we're going to work on the inside of the housing. First thing we're going to do is take out the manual hot shoe and convert it over to the TTL hot shoe. There's a little clip that you can release on that to pull it out, and then the TTL one will slide right in. There's only one way for it to go in, so you can't put it in the wrong direction. All right, next thing we're going to do is put the camera tray on the camera itself. So Robin's going to pull that tray out. As you see, there's no release mechanism for it. It just pulls straight out. There is a lip on the back of the camera tray that will line up with the back of the camera, and there's one screw. That lip will prevent it from rotating when you put the camera into the housing. All right, so next step we're going to do is we're going to set up for a lens. We're going to start off with a wide angle lens. We've got an 8-15 fisheye zoom lens. Because it has a zoom, we need to attach a gear to it so that you can operate the gear through the housing through this knob. So the first step we're going to do is take the zoom and clamp set that comes with the gear and put that on the lens. Now this is a universal type gear. Ikelite has a number of different kind of gears. Some of them are universal, some of them are specific to lenses. If you're unsure which one fits your lens, you can go on the Backscatter website and check out our port chart and our port finder and see what one fits your particular lens. So with this particular set, it comes with a gear, a clamp set, and two of these rubber foam spacers here. Those rubber foam spacers are in a thick size and a thin size. For this particular setup with this lens, it's a thin size. When you get yours and you're using a universal gear, all you need to do is test fit, see which one fits best, and use that one for your setup. All right, so the next step we're going to do is we're going to install the zoom clamp set onto the lens. You're going to install that from the back side of the lens, moving towards the front, and you're going to have the grooves facing forward. Pro tip on this one, if you put the slot at the top of the lens at the 12 o'clock position, this will make it easier for installing inside of the housing. Now that we've got the zoom clamp set installed, you can put the lens on the body. Now that we've got the lens on the camera with the zoom clamp set, what we're going to do is remove the body cap of the housing with this tool and that retaining ring. Now we're ready to put the gear inside the housing. So the gear will slide inside of the housing, and then the retaining ring will go in place to hold the gear in, and you use the tool to tighten that up. Now that we've installed the gear, you can check your work by turning the knob and make sure the gear spins freely.
All right, Jim, so we got the lens all set up, we got the gear in the housing. What comes next?
All right, let's get the extension ring and dome onto the housing. So before we start that, we're going to do a little bit of O-ring maintenance here. Now we're gonna do this one, the full maintenance on this one. We're not gonna do it for every single O-ring on this because it's the same procedure. So we're just gonna show you one, then we'll go ahead and put everything else together.
I think we'll do that with the port O-ring here. So we're gonna start by just kind of squeezing it together and then removing it.
It's an easy way to take that off. And so what you're looking for with an O-ring, you're going to do a visual inspection, a cleaning, and then you're going to grease it. So what Robin's doing right now is he's taking a look at it, make sure there's no dirt, hair, sand, any debris of whatsoever on it, cat hairs, because that would affect the integrity of the O-ring. So after he's done that, also making sure there's no damage to it, then he'll be able to clean this groove where the O-ring goes as well. For all the same stuff, make sure there's no damage to it, there's no hair, sand, dust, anything else on it. And after that's all done, grease the O-ring and then be able to reinstall it on here. When you're putting grease on the O-ring, you don't need to put a ton of grease on the O-ring itself. The grease does not make the seal, the O-ring makes the seal. So the grease is just there to make sure that the O-ring can slide in its position. So now we're ready to put the extension ring on. What you want to make sure is the thumb screws here are backed off far enough so they're not interfering with the installation when it goes over the O-ring. Because if you have that turned in too much, then it's going to actually come across the O-ring and could potentially damage the O-ring. Once he's got those backed off, he's going to take the extension ring, put it on with the one screw in the 12 o'clock position to line up with the holes where it'll lock into position. Once you've got that on, you want to visually inspect this area right here to make sure that everything is sitting flush all the way around the entire housing. That way, there's not going to be any chance that it's misaligned. And now we're ready to tighten the thumb screws.
What's next, Jim?
All right, next we're going to put the dome on. Exactly the same procedure. You need to back off the screws so that they don't get caught on the O-ring, and then put it in the same manner. Robin's installing this with the port on the table. The shade is longer than the dome port itself, so you're not going to scratch the front port of it at all. It's a little bit easier having this larger dome port and pushing the housing into it. Now, same thing, visually inspect to make sure it's fully seated all the way around. Once you've got that, then you can tighten the thumb screws. When you go ahead and take this apart, it's exactly a reverse procedure. However, if your hands are wet or something and you can't get a good grip on these thumb screws here, you can use the Allen key, because there is an Allen head in there as well, to loosen them if need be. So now that you got the dome port installed, you want to make sure the large part of the shade is at the top and the bottom, and that the screw hole on the top here is also in the 12 o'clock position. This way it'll avoid any vignetting with your lens. When traveling with your housing, packed in your gear, you really need to be careful with the port O-ring on the front of the housing. It's completely exposed, so you need to make sure to protect it, and also the sealing surface.
So we've run through a complete wide angle setup. Now tell us what we need to know about getting macro ready to go.
All right, so macro is just about the same as wide angle as far as setting up. The only difference is you have a flat port on the front instead of a dome port. For this particular lens, we actually have to use 2 extension rings and the flat port together. For macro lenses, we don't have zoom on them, we have focus. Most of the lens support for Ikelite is for autofocus only. There's only a handful of lenses where there's actually a manual focus gear available. As you can see on the front of the macro port, there's slots here at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock positions. That's so you could add third-party support for a flip holder for a macro lens. So now we're ready to get the camera inside the housing. The controls will need to be pulled out of the way so you can freely insert the camera inside the housing. Now that we've got the controls out of the way, we can install the camera inside the housing. When you're doing that, you want to make sure the zoom gear is in the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position, and the zoom gear clamp is also in the same 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position before you install the camera. When the camera is seated inside the housing, you want to align the controls and push them in, and also plug in the electronic hot shoe. So now we're ready to install the back of the housing. What you need to do is take the O-ring and do your O-ring maintenance on it, clean it, grease it, get it ready to go in. Also, clean this area of the housing where the sealing surface is before you put the housing back on. When you install the back of the housing, you want to make sure it's fully seated, then engage the 2 side clips, then the top clip. So now that we've got the housing back on, all sealed up, ready to go, we're ready to put on our strobe arms. Pro tip is when you have your arms set up, you want to have the handles facing back towards you so it's easy to adjust underwater. So now we're ready to install the TTL converter and the sync cables. We're going to inspect the sealing surface to make sure it's clean and there's no hair, sand, dirt, or any other debris in there. We're also going to do the same thing for all the other connections, because all these connections are the same on both ends of the sync cord and on the TTL converter itself.
So what's the next step, Jim? We're looking like a complete rig here.
All right, now time is to power everything on and test it out. So first, turn on the camera with the power dial there. After that, turn on the strobes. The strobes actually power the TTL converter, and the TTL converter has a button on it and an indicator light. The indicator light in red is for manual strobe operation, in blue it's for TTL operation. Now that the camera system's on, you want to take a few test shots. Make sure your strobes are firing properly. You also want to make sure the controls are working properly as well. So check out your autofocus on button, your shutter speed, your aperture, ISO, and other housing controls. Our last step is to pull a vacuum. There's a vacuum valve on the side of the housing. We're going to hook up the vacuum pump to that and pull it down to about -10.
Unlike our Backscatter airlock vacuum system, the Ikelite valve can leak in shallow water without this cap installed, so always verify that it's in place before you get in the water.
After your dive, when you want to open the housing, you need to hook up the pump to the valve and then use the release button on the pump itself to release the vacuum. Then you'll be able to open the housing. All right, now we're all ready to go diving with it.
There it is. So that's just about everything you need to know about shooting an Ikelite housing underwater. Remember, you can get even more information about Ikelite and all their products on Backscatter.com. And if you're curious about anything in this setup process or anything about any of these products, or maybe what you have was just a little bit different than what we were showing you in this video, just pick up the phone and give us a call. That's what we're here for. Remember, every order from Backscatter includes free lifetime tech support. We actually dive, shoot, and service everything we sell, and we ship internationally every day to our thousands of customers all over the world. If you ever need help with any of your gear, we're just a phone call away. Thanks for watching. I'm Robin from Backscatter signing off.
I'm Jim for Backscatter signing off.
And we'll catch you on the next one.